Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
G'day folks, Colin here from the Home Building Hub and welcome to another episode. I'm here with co-host Darren Brennan and this is part 2 of a little mini part 3 series, I guess, Daz, and that's all about giving you guys some common terms used in our industry. So we've just completed the land episode, so lots of land terms that relate to, I guess, your land contract and land purchase. Now today we're going to talk about the house-related or the builder-related terms, and then lastly, the next episode we'll talk specifically about contract drawings and the terms, I guess, a lot of acronyms on there that will be able to help you understand. So Darren, let's kick off with the house-related terms. Before we do, you want to run through and say g'day and run through the disclaimer for us?
Absolutely, mate. So, the disclaimer, whilst we're all about providing value to you, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any financial or legal decisions. Outside of that, there's a fee for the podcast. So if you're liking the podcast, please share it with somebody else. We don't charge at all for it. We don't have any sponsorship for the podcast. So it's all off our own back. But what would really assist us is if you could share the podcast with somebody that you think might get value out of it. And for anyone who's done that so far, we really appreciate your efforts and thanks for supporting us on the Home Building Hub. So let's jump straight into it. Cole, why don't I let you kick off the very first house-related term?
The very first one we have on our list is squares and square meters. Okay, so when you start your journey, you'll come across the size of homes. So the different units of measurement builders use, I guess mainly in here, in Victoria that is squares or square meters. Okay, squares I feel is the most common one, Darren. So you might be looking at a home that is 22 squares, but essentially for people to understand really quickly, 1 square is equal to 9.29 square meters. Okay, so 22 square home is about 210 square meters. So that's the first one that you need to know when you start looking at floor plans.
Great. Mine is full turnkey, which means everything is included to the point where you can simply collect the keys and move on in. So it includes things such as your front and rear landscaping, driveway, fences, letterbox, clothesline, cooling and blinds, as well as everything else that goes into making the home.
Yep, nice. So the third one, facade, so pronounced facade, not facade, is really the front of a home. So it's the cosmetic look and appeal, street appeal, the front of your home. And most builders have a different range of facades for you to choose from. Okay, so it's very rare you have a specific facade for a specific design unless it's a really small narrow lot that's been custom designs been done. But essentially for most house designs you have your choice of maybe 3 or 4 standard facades, and the builder may have 5 or 6 or many more upgradable ones as well. Okay, so it's that look of the front of your facade and it's interchangeable. So that's what the facade means.
Cool. Base price is my next one, which is essentially the price to build that particular home design, with a standard facade being one of the included facades at that price. And it's related back to a set of standard specifications or standard inclusions. So the base home with that standard facade and the base inclusions equals your base price. It usually excludes site-specific items such as site works, related to your block, estate requirements, and then any promotions if there are on offer, and any upgrades that you may select. So those things are excluded from the base price. Over to you, mate.
Site cost is next. So Darren just referred to the base price, and Darren's example once in another episode was that's really the house hovering above the ground. Site costs relate to the cost of the foundation of the home, so the concrete slab and the relevant piering and works required to build your home nice and safely and we'll make sure there's plenty of strength in the slab and no concerns around the foundation. Okay, so that's what a site cost is, and they vary from block to block. Okay, so just because you build the same house as your neighbour, your site cost may actually be different. So they factor in all of those requirements around the slab, but also site costs can make up council costs. They can talk about temporary fencing and a few other areas around that, Darren. So maybe there's a couple of sub terms within site cost. Daz, do you want to start with fill and fall?
Yeah, so fill and fall. Fill is any additional soil that has been added to the block on top of the established or existing surface levels, or the original ground level of that block. When there is fill present, you can expect that the site costs would likely increase. And it's more likely the builder will need to provide potentially piering to the foundation, so concrete or metal going deeper into the ground, back into that natural surface level. So
nice.
Over to you, mate.
So speaking of piering, that's one that you may come across. So if there's fill present on your block, depending on the level of compaction and a few other little goodies, realistically, piering is extra concrete underneath the slab that gets down to the established or the natural surface that provides extra strength and stability to your home. Okay, so site costs would usually include the concrete slab component, and then piering might be something separate for you. So I guess one way to explain that, understanding that if you have a backyard and you want to put some landscaping on top of that backyard, let's say crushed rock, and then you want to put a kid's cubby house on top of that crushed rock, the best thing to make it nice and stable is not just to sit it on top of the crushed rock, but probably dig some timber post down into the actual natural established earth that will hold the cubby house more firmly. And that's probably one of the examples I use that people understand that the crushed rock is maybe the top level. You've got to get through the crushed rock into the established surface level that will hold your cubby house up, so to speak. Okay, so piering is the same on a home that you construct. So a builder will allow for additional costs in the site cost for piering when necessary.
Cool. So retaining walls, and essentially retaining walls are put in place to try and flatten out your block. So they're holding up the soil that's, either from your neighbouring block or you're backfilling and you're trying to prevent the soil from going from your block onto their block, whilst you make your block as flat as possible to be able to build upon. They're generally made out of timber or concrete, and depending on what recommendations have been made by the drafts person and the engineer, will specify where, when, and how big they are required.
Nice. Soil classification. So we want to, I guess, highlight that the part of the process is to get a soil test and survey done. And a soil test will help determine the classification of the slab in which the builder needs to provide. So in order, when they do a soil test, they dig boreholes into the ground, and usually they'll come back with a report that says that land is classified as requiring it's an M class site or a H class site or P class site, which is P for I think it's for problematic, Darren, from memory, or
problematic.
Is that right? Correct. Yeah, so that's probably the P class site will incur the highest site costs, the M class will incur the lower site costs, okay? So basically there's a soil report that outlines, I guess the makeup of the sand, the silt and the clay, and, moderate elasticity or clay content versus, I guess, a fair bit more highly reactive, that moves up into the H and the P classes, okay? But probably to make it nice and simple, if the soil test is required, it by another third party, it tells the builder what soil conditions there are, which then dictates what sort of slab is required as the foundation of your home.
Cool. So over to estate covenants, requirements, guidelines, and we spoke about this in the last podcast, but these basically are a set of conditions set out that you need to apply by when building your home. So these can be related to the siding of the home, the finishes of the home, the specific design features, so the facade, etc. Might be ceiling heights, could be roof pitch, the angle of which the roof is pitched at. etc. It can also relate to things such as your garden layout and plantings, your driveway layout and the material of that, and so on. So those sort of items.
Building surveyor is another term that you should get familiar with. So a building surveyor is appointed to oversee the compliance of the home in relation to, I guess, getting the building permit, but also the construction of the home and ensuring that it meets relevant Australian standards. So one thing that I think gets mixed up, Daz, is that a building surveyor is often mixed up as to what they are, what they do, versus a building inspector or a private building consultant, which we'll cover next. A building surveyor is there to represent you, the client. They are not, paid by the builder. They're an independent business that makes sure that that builder is building the home within compliance of the standards. At the start of the process, you can pick your own surveyor, or most of the time people just go with the builder's preferred surveyor because they have a better relationship. They can get out to site quicker. They know each other, etc., etc. It's not because they're doing anything under the table. It's more that they just have a better, stronger relationship, and they can get things done a little bit quicker. Basically, so if you put in a third party or choose your own building surveyor, then that's a new relationship that's got to be created, and sometimes appointments may be dragged out and things like that. Okay, so surveyors there for your benefit as a client.
Cool. Over to me. So a building inspector or private building consultant, which is an independent inspector who the customer appoints to check the workmanship of the builder. So they're basically there as your eyes and ears, I guess, and you're paying them for that service. They'll consider the relevant standards. However, they'll often consider cosmetic items as well that are not covered by the standard. So they might say that, there's a mark on the wall that isn't covered by an Australian standard, but it does look a bit unsightly and should be fixed up because you're paying to get a really nice house, not one with a mark on the wall. So it'd be those sort of items as well. They would usually complete a comprehensive report for the homeowner to discuss with their builder. And I guess my point there is that not all items are required to be addressed by the builder. So just having an understanding that, okay, it'd be nice if that was done, but if it's not a requirement under the building code, there may be some times where you're not going to get that item fixed, or, there's not a whole lot wrong with your house, so they're trying to justify their position and be pretty picky on that. You'd like to hope that's not the case, and generally speaking, they're pretty good, and they're there to support you, the homeowner. And builders, certainly encourage people where they want to use an independent building inspector to certainly do so, and there's no issues there. So cool.
Yeah, I'd just add on that one, Darren, because it's really important understanding a surveyor is there to make sure your house complies with the codes, and the builder has to follow what a surveyor
Absolutely.
says. A building inspector or private consultant is not a regulatory body. It's just a business with someone who's got experience in the space and comes out and tells you, here's what I think, and they give you a very detailed 20, 30, 40-page report with images. Here's what we think that the builder should go and address. So the builder, as Darren said, does not need to address every one of those items because they're not directly related to compliance. They're directly related to, I guess, depends. It's up to the builder and the building inspector or the consultant to negotiate that. One thing to note and to add, Darren, is the timing. So if you employ a private building consultant, it will add additional build times to the number of visits they take. So some just do a practical completion inspection, which is one visit, and then it'll add usually 21 days or so to the building time because one, they've got to come out, two, they've got to do the report, three, the builder's got to review the report and then agree or disagree to the items and go and rectify the items that they've raised, that they've agreed upon. That can take, a 2, 3, 4 week period. So that gets added on to the days in which your contract outlined initially. Okay, so just be mindful of that. But again, it's something that, some people choose to do, Daz, and some people don't. But I think it's very good tip to understand the builder does not need to comply with all of the private building consultant notes, and they generally do put a lot on there that are cosmetic as well. So, but they're very valuable. Don't get me wrong. Of course they are. Yep. Price protection period is the next one for me. So that's really the time allowed for a builder to get the home to site and begin construction. So I guess it can vary from 6 to 18 months in the current market. But basically the protection period, let's say it's 12 months, is basically the builder's saying, okay, this price we give you today in the quote is protecting you for 12 months. And if your land is not ready to build on in that time, we will then charge you more money after that point. And that figure is factoring in the supplier and the trade additional increases that they could foresee. So if they're not going to build the house literally today, they may see in 6 months that the trades and suppliers will charge them a little bit more. So they try and factor that into the price. Okay, so that's what a price protection period is.
Cool. Then the next one is contingency, and what that's referring is to the time outside of that price protection period. So it's generally a predetermined monthly figure that the builder applies in the event that the land is delayed, or that the customer, and we're seeing some of that right now, is that the customer's delaying their construction because they might be sorting out their finance or whatever. They might want to hold off because they're a bit concerned about interest rates, but they're still really keen to build. So it can be not just the land title being delayed, but it can be other things. And a builder provides a price to you based on today on a proposed site start. And then if it goes outside of that time frame, then they'd be factoring in a cost for the increase in trades and supplies to build your home. So essentially, that's what that is. In the event that the land is delayed, there's more likely an additional cost to the builder will pass that on to you in the form of this contingency. Again, sometimes it's a fixed amount, sometimes it's a percentage amount. It's worth chatting to your builder. Some will not have a contingency at all and just say you need to go on today's pricing if you've exceeded that price protection period. So, yeah, understand what that looks like. It's not an open-ended book for the most part. I'd say most builders these days are saying that there's an additional period outside of the price protection period that they'll happily work with you on, and beyond that, they would revert to today's pricing or negotiate with you upon that. And they have rights within the contract to do so. So understand that is the case, and that they're doing that because they've got to remain, and you want them to remain profitable when they build your home. So yeah, that's contingency for you.
They're really taking a bit of a gamble on the forecasted price increases. The cost of a brick today is not going to be the cost of a brick tomorrow. So, but you're expecting them as a client to give you a fixed price contract, or at least a very close to fixed price contract. So their pricing, is allowing for those forecasted increases and rates. And a contingency just means that, it's a little bit of an insurance for the builder. So at least I know I'm going to get that, $1,000 or $2,000 a month for the, if your land is delayed, to cover some of those increases that they will inevitably face, So wall on boundary and zero.
Sorry,
Yeah, go Daz, yeah.
I was just going to touch one more on that because I think it is really relevant at the moment, is that most builders will honour the price that they offered you, provided it's within the time frame that was applicable. So, it's been pretty tough on builders, particularly when you've seen a lot of developers delay settlements, and we've seen some stuff up to 3 years. So when they've forecasted to be in 12 months and it's taken up to 3 years for the land title to come out. So, you just can't expect the builder to wear that cost, unfortunately. So, and for the most part, those people have bought that land 3 years ahead of today's pricing. So they've had a fair win on the land price in most cases, and that is great. But, the builder took a punt understanding that the land would be 12 months out, and all of a sudden pushes out to 3 years. They just can't honour that pricing. Yeah. In some cases it's gone up 50, 70, 80, $100,000 to build that home, and it's just no longer profitable. And therefore they have to exercise their right in the contract to either charge more or to go back to a new base price. And that's so that they can remain in business. So.
Yeah, it's a fair gamble. It's a bit like saying today, right now, if you just had your land titled, you're ready to build today, but you actually are saying, well, can I please have the base price and everything from 18 months ago? You'd just be laughed at, right? Because that's just not going to be relevant. But that's what you're asking a builder to price. If it is 18 months ago, they're saying to you, okay, I can give you 12 months. At no charge, but I'm going to charge you X dollars per month for the other 6 months. And then fast forward 18 months, here we are today. Is that extra, contingency period enough to cover the price increases that their builder's going to have incurred? Probably not. Definitely not in the last 18 months. But that's what it's for. It's just to protect, to make sure they get some money back if your land gets pushed out. The second last one wall on boundary or zero lot lines, sort of putting those together. But essentially, we're saying that because when you put a house on a block and you call it a siting or a site plan, the garage wall is usually 200 mil off that boundary. And the reason for that is that it's allowing for the gutter to hang out. Okay, so that's the standard width requirements, I suppose. So when you see a house design that suits a 12.5 metre lot, it's factoring in 200 mil off the boundary for the garage and usually 1.2 metres, 1200 mil on the other side of the house. Okay, so we want to explain to you a wall on boundary or zero lot line is a little different to that. Okay, so if you're going to build the brick wall literally on the boundary, as in the wall will be built on the boundary, it's called a zero lot line. And in that event, the gutter will actually no longer be allowed to overhang or hang out the side of the brick wall. It'll have to be lifted and placed on top of the actual gutter wall within the boundary. Okay, so that so the brick wall, I should say, within that boundary. So that's we say that because it's a common one people get a little bit lost with. Sometimes the reason for a builder to go to a zero lot line may be the lot width. Maybe your lot width is 12.3 metres, for example, or it's a more narrow lot. And there are other spaces, I guess, in the house, and not just the garage. There might be that one of the rear brick walls or one of the side room walls will go closer to the boundary if it doesn't have a window, for example, Daz. But one of the tips I can give you is that when you build a standard home on a standard lot, garage is 200 mil off to allow for the gutter. It can also be a zero lot line or it can be 1 metre plus. You can't just put a garage 500 mil off the boundary. There are certain rules and regulations. Okay, so that's what a zero lot line represents.
Cool. And lucky last for me, mate, which is orientation, which is basically the direction the home faces, e.g., the front of your home faces north, which my home right here does. So we face north, east in this direction, west in this direction, and south right behind us. This can impact the sunlight getting into the home, which in turn can impact the energy rating of the home. And you want to design your home to maximize that sunlight coming into your home so that you get a really nice outlook for your place and that you're able to really enjoy the sunlight, which is what most people like. It's going to warm you up during the day and make the house really nice to live in. So cool. Yep. That's a wrap on the all the building terms, mate. So done well there.
Yeah, we're going pretty well, 22 minutes. Just one little note on the orientation. To find the orientation of your block, refer to the plan of subdivision. It's probably the best document to show you that, which is something which will be in your land contract or the sales consultant can show you. Okay, there'll be a little north point somewhere for you. So, no, it's good, Daz. The next episode, guys, will be about contract drawings. We're going to go through a lot of acronyms and terms for you. We're going to shoot through those very quickly. But thanks for listening to this episode. Again, if you want to learn more about us, go to the introductory episode number 1. If you want to help us out a little bit, the fee is just to share the podcast with someone that might be able to get some value from it. If you've got any feedback, questions, anything like that, jump on the website, homebuildinghub.com.au. Other than that, Daz, we'll say goodbye and we'll see everyone on the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.
1, 2,